Hello and welcome to episode 278 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham.
This week, the Port Authority in Newark's New Jersey airport is retrofitting their historic air terminal to get rid of fossil fuels. Now, if only they could retrofit the airport to include a Cinnabon.
A listener who I called a hero writes a letter full of climate despair as an act of therapy. We respond, but only after I discuss it with my chatbot therapist, Linda. Hopefully she doesn't call me a lazy good-for-nothing again this week, because it's getting hard to tell the difference between her and my dominatrix chatbot.
A teenager failed their driving test because the electric car they were driving was too high-tech. Ironically, the examiner who failed the teen will soon be replaced by a robot.
Oh, that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. How are you? I'm exhausted from the intro.
Yes, look for the outtakes coming soon to a Patreon near you. You know, it only took us an hour or so to do the first minute.
Well, Brian, last Friday I had a weather report, the first ever James Whittingham weather report for the Clean Energy Show. Let's go back in time now to Friday and listen to what I had to say. And Brian, this is the Clean Energy Show weather report for Friday, September 12th, and it was humid all night, all day. I couldn't sleep last night, had to turn on the air conditioning, close the windows, and now today we've got a weird storm. Now, that's probably normal for a lot of people, but not for us. It's never humid in September, ever. It's just constant thunder. We get hot, we can get over 30 in September, but it's so dry that you could, dehydrate food. It's just very unusual to be this humid and stormy. I've never seen anything like it the decades I've lived here. The climate is weirding. So that's what the popular climatologist with Environment Canada says. The climate is weirding. It's trying to put it in every person's language. It's weirding. It's just not going to be normal anymore. And this humid weather where I had to turn on the air conditioning in mid-September to get it through the night because it was so humid is so weird. It is utterly weird.
Yeah, I have exhaust fans in my bathrooms upstairs, and they go off automatically when the humidity is high, and typically that's when you have a shower. But no, they're just going off now because it's too humid in the house for no reason other than it's humid outside.
Yeah, my doors aren't closing. This is late June, early July for here, maybe. We get a flow of humid air. But in September, in my decades and decades of life, it has never happened, and it is just strange. This is on top of the fact that it is smoky every day. U.S. and Canadian refineries are switching to winter-grade gasoline starting around September 15th, mandated by federal and provincial regulations to ensure easy vehicle startup in colder temperatures. It might seem weird for you in the southern states to have to do this on September 15th, but it is a federal regulation there, and it is in Canada as well. And the transition is often a trickle effect, starting with northern regions gradually spreading south as fuel inventories deplete. And this change results in more volatile fuel containing higher levels of butane, which allows for better vaporization and engine performance in cold conditions. But summer gasoline contains about 1.7% more energy than winter gasoline. There's a fact for you. So you're going to get less mileage, less fuel economy in the winter starting in September 15th, even if you're in Florida. Warm-up times aside, that's why you could measure reduced fuel economy outside the summer months. Yeah, kind of weird thing. And we have a refinery down the street here, and it is in changeover mode, as they say now.
Yeah, so is that sort of like a major operation to switch over to this new
formulation? I believe it is. Sometimes they do maintenance when they do changeover in the spring, so they'll have signs up saying we're in changeover right now, and there's a lot more people around. I think it's less in the fall, but in the spring when they do the changeover, there's a lot of maintenance that goes on. So I took a road trip in my EV the other night to the halfway point between the two major cities here to pick up my son, who is carless. If you've listened to the show, his car broke and it's gone to car heaven. And his crappy little car that I've been talking about forever, a 2000 rusty 2002 Honda Civic, you know what those sell for? $7,000. $7,000.
Wow.
That's what they're selling for. on all. That's what they're listed at. So he should have fixed it. I didn't know cars had gone that crazy. The used car market was still insane for that low of a car. And yeah, the Hondas and Toyotas are keeping more mileage than ever. So what I did, I went down and picked up, he took this bus, which they have a new bus, and it's pretty great. There was nobody on it. There was only a third full and was comfortable. And it was cheaper than gas. It's going to be cheaper than gas to get here. But I said I wanted an adventure. So I went out there and I checked out the Chargers in Davidson. And they're both working now, so no one had a report on that. I did my civic duty and did a PlugShare report to tell everybody that they're working fine because they're busy chargers. And so I spent Sunday getting our old gas SUV ready for him because he has to take it now. He wanted to take it, and we're not camping anymore because of my health conditions for a while. So I said, you take our 2003 Acura SUV, which is, I'm always amazed when I fire it up, Brian, because it's a luxury vehicle and it sounds nice. It runs nice. It's still together. It burns a hell of a lot of oil when you're towing our tent trailer. Yeah. I bring a whole giant everything that the engine holds extra to put back in it again when we're towing, but it's gotten that way. But it's fine. And he's going to use it, and it uses premium gas. So this is going to be a painful thing. And he's actually talking electric cars now for the first time. And, you know, he can see himself getting a job after he graduates in the spring. And yeah, I think he wants an electric car, but it's just a matter of where a young person like that would live. Can they charge? And yeah, so it was weird. And I spilled gas on me. We had to put gas in the jerry can. I dug up the jerry can because I don't even use it for my lawnmower anymore.
I hate going to gas stations. I mean, it's been a couple of years since I've had to do it. And by the way, a jerry can, I think that's a Canadian term.
Oh, is
that's
it?
Basically just a gas can.
Yeah, well, I've called it more gas cans than jerry cans in my life, but for some reason I'm calling it a jerry can now. It was just a weird experience to get the oil change because I hate oil changes, going to oil change places.
Oh, it's all awful. It's terrible.
But I was actually left there happy this time because I bought this pump inflator, which I have mentioned on the show before. It's a battery-operated thing from Temu. Yeah. And it will stop when it reaches a certain preset, pressure. Yeah. So you just leave it run and it stops. Well, I did it on one tire and I checked it with one of the little manual tire pressure gauges that you check your tires with. Yeah. And it was fine. It was good. It was right on. So I did all the tires, and it turns out they were at 40 pounds instead of 32, and I didn't know that. And they just told us, all the tires are at 40, and didn't want to do anything. I said, could you please lower it to 32, because that is the rated pressure for them. So fortunately, they did that. They added antifreeze, which my son is absolutely terrified of burning antifreeze in the engine because of what happened to his car and his breakdown on the bridge in Vancouver. Yeah. He says, my next car is not going to have a temperature gauge because it'll just stress me out to look at it. So that was cool. And I was on the way home, we were driving in the edge of the city to test out the car. And I saw a mobile air quality monitoring station pictured here in our script. It's, guess where I saw it? The absolute furthest away from the refinery they could possibly park it and be within city limits. If you drew on a map the place where that would be, that's where they parked it. Because it will do more than our station will. It will do, different chemicals and things, but they're not interested in scaring people of what the fossil fuel industry is putting into the air. And Brian, our air quality monitor, I'm certain now that it is detecting emissions from the steel refinery, because I noticed a spike in parts per million one. It does parts per million 1, 2.5, and 10. And you can break it down to each of those. Yeah. And the parts per million 1 is spiking. And that normal pollution is around 2.5 or higher, car pollution and smog and stuff like that. But I looked it up, and sure enough, the biggest emissions is around 1 part per million from a electric arc steel mill, which ours is. It doesn't use coal to make fire. It uses electricity. And when I get that wind, I can smell it now. And then I look and I check the monitor, and sure enough, it's spiking during that time that the wind is coming. I also use a different wind gauge from somebody who's about 1 kilometer or 2 away from me, and he has it online live, and I can see, and it's very reliable.
You're becoming like an air quality sommelier. You can taste and smell the fine textures.
I can. I just have to get down the volatile organic compounds that are coming out of the refinery because they have neurotoxins and carcinogens in them. And I have to get those finely tuned because there is different scents from the refinery.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on it, but I'm in training. And that's all very depressing. So I exported the data from our air quality monitor, which we've had since June. And I looked at the whole month. Every day has it broken down of the air quality, and it was very bad. 40 of the last 90 days were good quality air, but that means the majority of them were bad. Sometimes it was just at night, but a majority of those had bad air. And 4 good air quality days in our city we're in southern Canada on the plains in the western Canada. If you look at a map, we're somewhere a little bit left of center towards the United States border. So we're getting a lot of smoke from forest fires still, and we have only had 4 days since August 26th. And that's via the data from the actual government monitor that had historical data. Since July 1st, let's call that my official start of summer, July 1st, because that's when it's warm here. It takes a while here to really reach summer. Only 38% of the days have had good air quality, according to the United States Air Quality Index. Only 38% of them have been rated as good. And so I was right when I speculated that 2/3 of our days this summer were smoking. I wasn't far off.
Yeah.
That is really... I mean, can you remember smoke as a kid? Like, I don't remember any smoke as a kid.
No, I remember one bad year when I had an apartment on Cameron Street. So that was about 30 years ago. I remember we had it's a bunch of forest fire smoke one summer, and that 30 years ago, but I don't remember it before that.
Well, I don't remember it at all. Like, I don't remember forest fire smoke as a kid. I don't remember it much. I know in the 2000s, we've had the odd day, here and there of a little bit of smoke, but it's gotten so worse since 2023. 2023 was the worst on record, and there's all kinds of studies coming out right now on the 2023, how many people it's killed in the world. And, we had a story last week about the economic impacts, about the hours lost and the hospital room visits up.
Yep.
But that is kind of the theme of this show is things are bad now. They're only going to get worse. And we'll get to that later about a letter from our friend who has a little bit to despair on climate. But we'll try and turn that frown upside down a little bit later in the show.
Okay, so this is from Canary Media, electrifying the Newark airport. So I thought there was tons of interesting things in the story because we've talked about retrofitting buildings before and getting rid of fossil fuels and electrifying and putting in heat pumps and so forth. But there just was a ton of things in here that I thought was interesting. First of all, just from an architecture standpoint, because I'm a big fan of interesting architecture. So this Newark airport building is from 1935, and it was the first passenger air terminal in the United States.
Really?
And they don't use it as an air terminal anymore. It's just they've converted it into administration for the airport, but they saved it. It's this amazing Art Deco building from 1935, and it really reminds you of an old train station. Like you can easily imagine a train station built in this kind of style, marble and terrazzo everywhere and, the Art Deco. So it's just a gorgeous building, and I'm so glad they saved it. We had a fabulous Art Deco airport building like that in our city, and, they tore it down decades ago. Like It's been gone for a really long time. It was probably from the 40s, I think, and they probably got rid of it, maybe back in the 60s. But yeah, they still have this old one from 1935. It's the first edifice owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which is a bi-state transportation agency, to undergo an all-electric retrofit. So this Port Authority, they have more than 1,000 buildings, and they're going to retrofit all of them eventually. They're going to be carbon neutral by 2050 is their plan. It's always usually more difficult, the older the building is, but this is the first one that they're doing. So it's sort of a test case and a sort of in many ways, like a worst case scenario. Like if they can retrofit this one, then they should be able to retrofit all of them. So they put 5 large heat pumps on the roof for zero emission heating and cooling. They put an energy recovery system in to recycle waste heat from the locker and the IT rooms. They added a system that can dial down power use when the grid is strained by high demand. I thought that was interesting. And in the parking lot, they put in 29 charging ports for electric vehicles. Okay, so there were gas boilers as well, and they replaced them with electric resistive gas boilers. Now, that's not as efficient as a heat pump boiler, but as we've discussed before, you often can't swap out a heat pump boiler for a natural gas boiler because they just work at too different a temperature. The heat pump will always tend to work at a lower temperature, and then the piping just doesn't work. You need a different diameter pipe if you're going to do, a heat pump boiler. So they went with electric resistive boilers instead. So not as efficient, but simpler. And I think sometimes that's the answer as well. We don't always have to go with the most complicated solution. Electric resistive heaters, they tend to use more energy, but they're a very, very simple mechanism. And the heat pumps are going to end up doing most of the work. So this took 18 months to do. It cost $15 million, and they estimate that's about $3 million more than if they had stuck with natural gas and upgrading the natural gas. So it did cost them more. They don't think they're going to save any money on their utility bill, because of things like the resistive heaters. Like they think their utility bill is going to be about the same, even though they have reduced their overall energy use and they, upgraded the insulation and things like that to just make it more efficient. But the article also mentioned that there's a rehabilitation tax credit in the United States that has not been removed. And we know a lot of these clean energy, retrofit tax credit type things have been removed, but there's one that has not, and it's called the rehabilitation credit, and it has to do with specifically heritage buildings.
Oh, okay.
Like this is a listed heritage property, and there's, of course, thousands and thousands and thousands of those buildings in the U.S., and apparently they can still access this rehabilitation tax credit and get some funding to help with this kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting. Now, they actually said they didn't use this credit because they thought it would take too much time or something, and they could afford it. But nevertheless, that was interesting. And then the sort of final point, the director of operations, who was kind of in charge of all this at the Port Authority, said he did this in part because he worked on a climate change project for school with his 14-year-old daughter. And that really opened his eyes to what we have to do. And unfortunately, we don't all have a 14-year-old daughter that is going to sort of force us to think about these issues. And unfortunately, and you can sort of understand it, people have busy lives. They have lots of things to do. You go gas up your car, you drive to work, you've got other things to worry about than trying to remake the energy system. But this particular guy, who happened to be very much a person in charge, who could make decisions, who could make things happen in the correct direction, was definitely helped by this knowledge that he got from working with his daughter.
Well, shout out to teachers. And of course, right-wing people in the United States are going to have to believe that this teacher's woke and they're giving the woke mind virus to my kid, who's now worried about climate change, which of course is not real. Let's burn coal because it's pure and we'll go back to the 50s and women can be in the kitchen and barefoot and that's what they want. And just, I don't know.
I read the comic strips, and one of the ones I read every day is called Classic Nancy. Like these are comic strips from the 1940s and 50s by Ernie Bushmiller. It's one of the great comic strips of all time. And the one today was Sluggo, the sort of one of the kids in the strip. He said, "Oh, I threw a lump of coal and broke a window." And just that in itself, I thought was hilarious. Like lumps of coal were just sitting around in the 1950s.
And you threw my windows
kids to play with.
Sure.
Yeah. And then the joke was he broke a bunch of expensive vases that were through the window that he broke. But anyway, you always come up with these little weird things from reading a comic strip from 1950 about how things used to be.
All right, Brian, let's dip into the mailbag a little bit early this week. We've got a massive letter from Glenn Wright, our environmental lawyer, activist, farmer, and engineer, and listens to the show, supports the show, helped us with our Clean Energy Show Air project. Glenn wrote us a letter that's too long for the show, so I put it on Patreon. We already have some comments up there. So if you want to look at it, it's there on Patreon. I kept it from being fully public, though, in case Glenn doesn't want it fully public. So it's there. If you're a free member or higher, you can still have it for free. You just have to be a member of Patreon. So here we go. Please excuse this long email, but I am writing it as a form of therapy for myself and seek your help and guidance. Oh, you've come to the wrong place, Glenn. I don't know, Brian, are you up to this?
No.
You filling up? No? Okay. I hear you comment about forest fires at length in recent podcast episodes, and I share your concern about the smoke, but I often think that we humans are not being honest about the dire situation we face. And Glenn, I agree with you. If I can interject here, we focus on the tech progress on this show a lot, and we have happy stories, but it is largely, that sort of thing. We don't focus on feedback loops a lot. Although I will say we are getting smarter and expanding more into climate talk as we go along with this podcast, and that's what our listeners want from us, I think. But yeah, that's the type of stuff that keeps sensible people up at night, and we're not necessarily touching on it. We all have bad days, Brian. I do all the time with the climate, especially recently. It's certainly dire sometimes, and with the smoke and with the politics, it is often easy to get discouraged. And, for bad weeks and bad days, I can relate. But why don't you continue the letter?
Yeah, and I'll just add that the climate has already changed. And so, that's why I don't like to dwell on it. I mean, it's depressing, but the climate has already changed. And of course, it's just going to get worse. So even though we are doing things to mitigate this, switching to electric cars and so forth, that we should have done all that 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's kind of too late. But of course, we do have to continue and do our best to continue to switch it over. All right, the letter continues. I worry that the forest is shifting from a carbon sink to a carbon source, thus becoming one of the dangerous positive feedbacks that will make climate change intensify in a non-linear way, accelerating beyond our ability to adapt. It also angers me that the provincial government seeks to assert its right to various resources like oil, coal, potash, uranium, and so on, but absolves its responsibility to manage our provincial forests. The Wildfire Act of Saskatchewan has a section, S4, that reads, nothing in this act imposes an obligation on A, the minister to carry out wildfire management on the land or the Crown to pay compensation and so forth.
Glenn continues, so I fear our provincial government wishes to promote business as usual, expanding oil and gas and coal reliance, while ignoring that our air quality will grow worse due to emissions from dirty energy and exacerbated forest fire smoke. The right-wing ideologists say that our emissions are so small, it is not to matter, and there is no glass bubble isolating Saskatchewan from the rest of the world. But this is the problem, a tragedy of the commons, as no one is going to lead, and everyone wants to sell the last drop of oil, gas, and coal. Certainly true. And Glenn goes on to make the following points, which I'll summarize here. Forests won't recover on their own. I think sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, depending on how it burns, depending on how it's managed. Photosynthesis-based removal via forests is the best negative emissions strategy, and Canada must enhance forests to meet international climate obligations. So, yeah, I agree with that. We're only starting to now realize that we have to try and do something with these forest fires.
Yeah, but I think it is becoming true that Canada's forests, we can plant more trees, but if they're just going to burn, it's not going to be the best strategy. Something like a tropical rainforest, I think, tends to be a better type of carbon sink.
And my son has been telling me about how the climate is expected to change in Canada, and how the boreal forest will be able to grow more north than where it is now. But will it? I mean, that doesn't happen overnight. You need soil and the spreading of the forest. And that means that the current boreal forest, the southern parts of it, will burn even more frequently and won't be forests anymore. But that transition is not going to happen easily. Glenn goes on, policy and governance, all energy has impacts. Infinite economic growth is unsustainable. On a finite planet, humanity must shift from extraction towards stewardship and a steady state economy. I agree, but we all see the future as being a green future, but that's going to require manufacturing a lot of things. But when we get there, when all vehicles are electric and whatever that is, how many ever vehicles there are, hopefully there's less of them, and more public transportation and more local neighborhoods to live in, it becomes a circular economy. That means when you build something like a battery for a bus or an EV, you recycle the whole thing. And I'm very encouraged by the recycling that is available for batteries, because it's even more than 100%. It's almost 100% now. And they're just starting this game. They're just, it's just getting going.
Yeah. And of course, anti-environmentalists will often point out, well, building an electric car has a carbon footprint, and that is absolutely true. And that is absolutely unfortunate. But I don't see us stopping the production of cars. So, that seems like the only way forward. And then, eventually we'll get to a point where, the batteries are just simply reused.
So humanity must shift away from extraction towards stewardship and a steady state economy. Agreed, but we are so far away from that I can't even begin to fathom that, because they're look at the political resistance to renewables as something different, the change there. Telling people to stop consuming and not be free is going to be a really difficult task. I don't know what that's going to take. We're going to have hundreds of millions of climate refugees, and I don't think people will still get it. It'll take generations before that happens, I think. We'll see. But there's not even a lot of talk of it yet. Negative emissions and BECCS. Negative emissions are essential for net zero and cleaner air. Bioenergy with carbon capture and storage could deliver negative emissions electricity if done responsibly. Requires sustainable forestry, indigenous consultation, carbon pricing, and ecological safeguards. Poorly managed BECCS could devastate forests in the Lorax scenario. And he goes on to say that, I guess what I really want us to do is think beyond the romantic idea that if we stop burning fossil fuels, that things will magically get better. It's not enough. No, we know that, Glenn. We know that.
Yeah.
But this is step one. And I'm going by what all the climate experts say and all the people who are really pushing this transition forward on the global level. The Paris Accord, first you get the fossil fuels gone. That's step one. So we have to do that. And Glenn goes on to say, we have to bring the atmospheric CO2 back down to less than 400 parts per million. Yes, our emissions are small on the world stage, but the obligation to manage our forests for our own air quality and for the international obligation to enhance our carbon sink is serious. We are way past the point of letting nature run its course. Do you feel that BECCS, if done with sustainable forestry management as done in the Scandinavian countries, would be a clean air source we should deploy in Saskatchewan? I don't know, Glenn. I know that everybody we have listening to the show has their own pet project, pet type of solution.
Yeah.
Nuclear, hydrogen. Those people get pissed off when I downplay the economics of that, the reality of that. To them, I say, show me the hydrogen, show me the nuclear that's getting built. It's dwarfed by renewables at that stage. Now, I firmly believe that if we didn't have those renewables, we would be going so hard in nuclear that the whole world would come together and there'd be great efficiencies in that. And it would be the great source of the future, but I don't see it right now. And I'm guided by people who are smarter than me in that area. And he says, I know James called me a hero, which is flattering, but I feel that I am a deep thinker that is misunderstood and ignored. But I believe those with the privilege to know have a duty to act. So I am compelled to try and accelerate the transition to sustainability, but I acknowledge my own behavior is not what it needs to be. Sincerely yours, seeking help to reconcile our relationship with nature, Glenn. Now, Glenn, I'll keep an open mind about carbon capture, BECCS, and we'll talk about it on the show. We're not necessarily going to focus on that because there's not a lot of stories on that all the time, so it may not come up more than once or twice a year, but we will, and it helps when we hear from our listeners what they're thinking because that does guide us and it does broaden our thinking on issues, so I appreciate the letter. Yeah, but in Saskatchewan, you're talking about that being a solution. It has to be solar and wind right now and batteries. It has to be because other countries in our situation have done it. And we have to get to that point. We have to get off the ground and decarbonize the coal. We can't say that's not going to work because that's the assumption that it's not going to work. And you're saying, well, I don't feel good about manufacturing solar panels and wind turbines. Well, even those can be recycled. Even those can be part of a circular economy. They're starting to work on that. And I imagine when all the solar and wind from now gets recycled 20, 25 years from now, they'll have something figured out to do that better. And that can become a part of a circular economy. That's my thinking. What do you guys think? Let us know at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And yeah, I just think what you're talking about is the last 20% of what climate people always say is we got to decarbonize the grid and electrify transportation. And then we get to the hard stuff by 2050, by 2045. of decarbonizing manufacturing like steel and cement and things like that. That's the last harder piece of the puzzle. And some people think that's only like 5 or 10% of the whole thing. Well, maybe, solar and wind may not do everything for Saskatchewan and batteries. And maybe that's when we have to start talking about what you're talking about. But right now, I feel like we have nothing here. And the Netherlands has, 30% of their grid is renewables that we could have here easily instead of burning coal to 2050.
Yeah, we got to do the easy stuff first, and solar, wind, and batteries is easy and doable now.
Here's an article from the Conversation to Counter Negative Thoughts About Climate Progress. It's titled, Climate Action Can Feel Slow, but the Fastest Energy Leap in History Has Begun. This is on The Conversation, and it argues that despite perceptions of slow progress, the world is undergoing the fastest energy transition in history. Unlike past shifts from wood to coal or coal to oil, the renewable revolution is moving at record speed. Over the past decade, renewables have become cheap and reliable, with storage and electric vehicles rapidly following. Investment is soaring. Clean energy spending in 2025 will reach Australian $3.3 trillion, more than double what fossil fuel spending is. Solar and wind now dominate new capacity worldwide, especially in China, the EU, the US, India, and across the global south. Developing nations like Pakistan, Sierra Leone are rapidly adopting solar. Emissions are decoupling from growth. China's emissions are falling even as GDP rises. Renewables, EVs, batteries are now on an S-curve, accelerating sharply. Fossil fuels are being displaced, with coal plants closing in the UK and Poland reducing reliance. And this article stresses that progress is real, and dismissing it risks fueling climate fatalism, which we don't want to do, and that is something we all fall into. And I can say right now, I don't like the climate the way it is. It's horrible. And, the more north you go, Brian, the more the climate changes. And we talk about the Arctic going up by 6 degrees and everyone else going up by 0.5 or 1 degree. And we're feeling that here because the boreal forests are burning.
And there's a long list of positive things that are happening. We know positive things are happening. We report on them every week on the podcast. We keep thinking we're hitting peak oil use. And then, it always seems like we're not quite there to peak oil use. So, that kind of thing can be discouraging. But I think the overall point is true, that this is likely the fastest energy transition in history. It just can't seem to go in, we need it to go faster, but how you get, all the billions of people on Earth to make this go faster at the same time, tricky.
Glenn, we'll take your points, and there's more discussion on our Patreon page about that letter, and we will consider it and get back to you throughout the show. It's not something we can address all in one episode, but I'm sure we'll have it in our minds as we go forward. Thank you for the letter.
All right, now on to a funner and lighter story. Teen fails driving test. This is from Drive Tesla Canada. Now, I think we've talked a little bit about driving tests before. I believe your kids took their driving test in the Nissan Leaf. Is that correct?
My son did. My daughter did in the Bolt.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was less than a year ago, I think. So, yeah. Or no, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. And when my son took his driving test, we had both a gas car and an electric car. So we did have to sort of make a decision. We thought, it'd just be easier to use the gas car. And that was the one he was more familiar with. But anyway, the story points out there is, potentially some issues with using an electric car on your driving test. And so this happened in North Bay, Ontario, here in Canada. And the story says this person's daughter was using the family's Model Y long range after their truck was unavailable for the test. So I think they were thinking the same thing. They were planning to use the gas vehicle for the test, but they ended up with the Tesla Model Y. After completing the test and receiving 100%, the examiner failed to give her a pass, claiming the car was too high-tech, specifically mentioning the regenerative braking system and a green light chime. So the Tesla has a cool feature that when the light turns green, you're waiting for the light to change, you get a little ding. And it's great because if you're not paying attention, if your eyes are wandering or whatever, ding, it reminds you that the light is green and you can go, because we've all been waiting behind people at a green light that aren't going because they're not paying attention. But the regenerative braking thing seems to be the larger thing. And if you can look at it just for a second from the perspective of the examiner, if you give a test to somebody and you don't ever see them using a brake, you might think to yourself, oh, this person is never going to know how to use a car with a brake. It's a bit of a stretch, but that's the thinking. And if you don't know, how these cars work, you might assume that this high-tech car, and it's, a Tesla looks very high-tech. It's got the screen. It's got all the things happening on it. You might assume, oh, it's not the driver slowing the car down. It's the car slowing itself down through some kind of, like radar cruise mechanism.
It's not like they put it on full self-driving and just said,
no.
Let me just program that in where we're going. And but I will push back because a lot of cars have tech these days. If you look at cars that are coming out, they all have high tech. The detection of a green light is something that any car can have. It has nothing to do with it being electric.
Yeah, and lots of cars have an emergency braking that kicks in if you're going to hit something. So
mine has a little picture of a pedestrian that shows up if I almost hit somebody. I just noticed that the other day.
But still, you would think that a driving examiner who's giving these tests, like they're going to be giving, hundreds of tests in a month. You'd think that they would have come across many, many, many electric cars with regenerative braking by now, or at least have had like a 30-second.
North Bay.
That's true. North Bay, it's close enough to Toronto that I'm sure there's tons of electric cars there. But a 30-second staff meeting would also address this because I could see somebody having like we talk about this stuff all the time. I've been using regenerative braking for at least 5 years now. I did find it very weird when I first got my car, and I did actually shut it off for a while. Mostly because I found it difficult to back out of the driveway. I was always lurching the car back and forth, backing out of the driveway, and I got annoyed with myself. Yeah. So I turned it off for a while. Now,
we've got a button that does that, though. You probably had to go into the computer screen and dink with things.
Yeah, you got to change things on a screen.
There's another Canadian expression.
Now I use it, and it's the greatest thing ever. Like, why would you use two pedals when one can do the job most of the time? It's just way sort of more efficient and smart.
It is. And it's easier in stop and go traffic. You're not lifting your leg up off the floor to go somewhere else. And it's just also, if you take your foot off the pedal, the accelerator pedal, it starts to slow down right away. So there's that quick, immediate slowing down before you get to the brake. If it will slow you better than in an emergency if you have to go for the brake quickly. And now my daughter did take the Bolt, which is a bit techy of a car. And it was brand new, I think, at the time, about a year and 3/4 ago, because she's turning 18 in November. And that's when she did it. And I remember thinking, I hope this is okay. I hope they don't get weird about things. But she wasn't using regenerative braking. Neither of my kids. They don't drive enough to get used to it. So I think that was the issue. And my son, drives another car. So he always turns it off. Yeah. And I think my son was, how old is he? He's turning 22. So almost 6 years ago, he took his driving test in the Leaf. And I'm pretty sure he was the first one in Saskatchewan because I asked around and he had never seen an electric car before.
Yeah.
And that was when the heater worked because it was winter when he took that test, kind of cold. Actually, we weren't going to use the electric car because we got rear-ended in the Prius when we were driver training the 2 days before his test.
Yeah.
Because he stopped at lights, which you don't do here. If it turns orange and you can stop, you're supposed to stop. So he was practicing what to do on the test, and boom, some jackass who was possibly drunk ran into the back of us.
Anyway, the story had a couple other great examples here of this happening. This has happened before. This isn't the first time a Tesla has been the cause of a failed road test. In California in 2021, a 16-year-old failed their test because the examiner felt the car was slowing on its own due to the regenerative braking. After media attention, the California DMV stepped in, clarifying that regenerative braking alone should not be grounds for a failure, and the student's result was then changed to a pass. And then in Arizona last year, another teen's test was initially failed under suspicion that Tesla's full self-driving software had been used, even though the car didn't have that installed, which is, it's a software thing you have to pay for, and not every car has it. And officials later revised their reasoning to regenerative braking before pledging to review testing the standards for EVs. So yes, the instructors are seeing the students not using the brake and assuming that the car is stopping on their behalf.
All right, let's dip into the mailbag again quickly. Hi, James and Brian. Linda and I wanted to be sure that you saw this Clean Technica article in Norway. The story ties together nicely with James's recent BC trip. Reports regarding how far ahead BC, that's a province in the west coast of Canada, where I went on vacation this summer, is with their EV and clean energy programs. Visit other provinces like the one Brian and I live in, or the United States for that matter. Although there's places in the United States with very good charging. It's actually, places close to us probably have the worst of it, the more barren, but there are lots of good places there. So he also says, we joined Patreon a couple months ago to help support the show. We look forward to the show every week to a new podcast episode. You're doing a great service. We are hopeful here in the United States that the next administration gets us back on track with EV growth and clean energy. And we tell our friends about your podcast as well. Thank you. We appreciate all that, Denny and Linda. And there are about 1,800 to 2,000 gas stations in Norway. The Google AI overview stated most European gas stations have 6 to 12 nozzles, or 6 to 16 nozzles at each gas station, according to this article that is in Clean Technica and used Google AI to estimate that. If each gas station in Norway has about 12 fuel nozzles and there are about 2,000 stations, the total number of fuel nozzles is about 24,000 or so. But here's the rub. There are 27,000 fast charging plugs. They kind of look like gas nozzles, but they distribute electricity. This is the fast charging ones. There's now more fast charging nozzles than gas nozzles in Norway. And there are about 50% of the cars on the road are electrified with a plug. And almost all cars there sold now, you heard me right, almost all of them are electric.
And 2025, this is the last year that you'll be able to legally buy a new gas car in Norway. They're not making you get rid of your old gas cars. Those are going to stay on the road. But they've been so far ahead that, yes, the entire fleet now is around 50%, I think, as we read on a story recently. So, yeah, Norway is just farther ahead than everybody else. So they are the ones with more fast chargers than gas nozzles. That just makes sense.
So political parties in Canada here are putting around misinformation about our 2035 transition to EV sales, 100% EV sales in Canada. And people think they're scaring people by saying you got to get rid of your gas car in 2035 and send it to the wrecker. But no, you could keep doing them and you can still buy a gas car. It just has to be a plug-in hybrid at 2035. And trust me, people, that's 10 years from now. If you don't want to get an electric car by then, there's something wrong with you. You're 106 years old and you're just not understanding what's going on, because they're way better. And any issue you have with an electric car, they've solved it. They're coming down with them right now in China. They're starting with premium cars, and they'll eventually make it here, and they'll work in cold weather. They'll charge fast. They'll go longer. They'll do whatever the heck you want it to do. There's no excuse not to like an electric car, because they are so much better. And you never have to go to one of those horrible oil change places. And by the way, there's more fast charging nozzles than gas nozzles, but there's also hundreds of thousands of home charging ports like you and I have to charge our EV.
Yeah.
And on top of that, so it's dwarfs what you can do with a gas car already. And I've predicted that, and this has already happened, that gas stations are 100% electric now. They don't make any money off of the gas if only half the people are buying it. It's a tough business, so it's not worth having those tanks in the ground getting dug up every so often. So forget it. It's done.
Yeah. It's always been a low margin business, gasoline. There's always another gas station on the next corner, so they always compete on price. So they tend to make their money on, chips and sodas and whatnot. In the old days, it was service, right? Gas stations also offered mechanic services. And, now they've switched to fast food snacks. We have more listener mail pertinent to our local listeners, which you can find on the extended edition of this episode, which is available on our Patreon page, patreon.com/cleanenergypod.
You can contact us by email. You can leave us a SpeakPipe voicemail if you like, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And of course, on our Patreon page is where everything happens, the conversations, the bonus content, and all that. Join our Patreon today as a paying member and get access to our exclusive Patreon episodes. And coming up next is the lightning round. Thanks to everyone who supports our show. For the lightning round.
The Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Geothermal startup Rooftop uses refrigerants, not water, to make energy. The new technology aims to lower costs and increase bankability by reducing the need for re-drilling and replacing pricey components. It can also help reduce water use in the arid western U.S. So normal geothermal uses water pipes into the ground and sometimes just pipes into the ground to put it there and into the rocks under the earth and suck it back out again. But this is using refrigerants, which is more efficient, and you don't need water. Sometimes they use a lot of water in geothermal, believe it or not. BYD launches an e-bus platform called 3.0 for electric buses, delivering enhanced safety and comfort with up to 730 kilometers or 456 miles of range. These new buses, BYD makes a lot of buses in China. A lot of the buses in the world are made by them, and they're also in China. Some cities, big cities, just have electric buses in China. Vehicles built on the platform can optionally feature active suspension for a more comfortable ride experience, and they have integrated driver disability assistant. I found this funny, Brian. System 2.0 on the new platform. Should the driver experience a sudden health emergency, passengers can activate a button on the dashboard to initiate an automatic safe halt. Now, I can't imagine what that situation is. They're slumped over and dead.
Yeah.
You're barreling down a highway, but straight and not into the ditch.
Yeah.
Somebody notices, goes up to the dash and hits the button. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
It's like Speed 6?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, presumably you're going to crash into something before that happens, but, we'll see.
Well, maybe they have driver assistance, so it does lane keeping. That's probably a good idea if your drivers are going to die and you need this button.
Yeah. There's a new Tesla update coming where it will give you a notice on the screen that says things like,
we think you're dead.
Well, I mean that, but we detect that you're drowsy. Like it will warn you that it can detect drowsiness and that you should maybe think about pulling over.
Well, I had that on our first Prius, and it was a little coffee cup symbol and said, do you think you should pull over? And I took it as insulting because I wasn't tired. It was just the way I was, going out of lanes, back into lanes or something again. And that was a long time ago. This bus also has a high-speed tire blow stability system, which is good, I guess, because buses you lose a tire, you can roll over and people get really hurt. Boasts millisecond level response times, maintaining vehicle stability during blowouts. It speeds up to 100 kilometers an hour, according to the company. Harnessing fusion energy for electricity is possible the next decade, says U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who told that to Bloomberg. And my response to that is no. No, it is not going to happen in the next decade. I'll eat my house, Brian, if that's true, my entire house. Don't listen to anything this jackwagon has to say or anything in the U.S. government right now. Rooftop solar generation has grown rapidly in Puerto Rico in the last decade. Residential and commercial rooftop solar capacity has quintupled in just the last 4 years, driven by the unreliability of the electric grid there, which of course has a lot to do with hurricanes. It's time for a CES Fast Fact. Renewable diesel plus biodiesel now supply more than 70% of diesel consumed in California. So most of the diesel there ain't diesel. It's a majority of it is biodiesel or renewable diesel. Those are two different things. Look it up yourself. I can't do everything. You would need 4,400 SMRs. Those are small modular nuclear reactors that don't exist yet, really. Well, maybe one or two in the world, to match the likely output of wind and solar by 2050. The way that wind and solar are expanding, what they expect it to be, that's how many nuclear reactors of the small variety you would need.
4,400. And
even today, you would need 1,200 of them to match the current wind and solar that is in the world. That's from Michael Liebrecht from BNEF. There's a link there, I hope, for you if you want to look it up. It is only mid-September, Brian. That means the year is not nearly over, but France has already generated more solar power than it did the whole of 2024 already. Another CES Fast Fact. The adoption curve of EVs this century is much steeper than the adoption of personal computers starting in the late 70s.
Yeah.
We complain about how slow it goes sometimes, and we wish it would go faster, but really,
Yeah.
it's going pretty good.
We know that these things, technology disruptions tend to happen pretty quickly, but let's make it quicker.
Xpeng's first European production facility is in Austria, where the first batch of G6 and G9 SUVs have rolled out. I note that because that's one of the major Chinese automakers, and they are actually setting up factories in foreign countries now.
Yeah.
And since Europe likes EVs, they are setting up shop there.
They are moving so quickly, it's crazy.
Western wildfires have produced massive plumes of smoke that clouded eastern skies in the United States. But a new study finds that heat from fires is also reshaping weather in ways that are curbing pollution on the East Coast. You heard me right. Wildfires in the West are curbing pollution on the East Coast of the United States. This modeling study reveals that the intense heat rising from wildfires weakens the flow of cool, moist air from the west to the Great Plains. Warmer, drier air on the Great Plains in turn draws in winds from the east. Easterly winds not only suppress the spread of smoke from western fires, they also bring in moisture from the Atlantic Ocean. And that extra moisture fuels rainfall on the East Coast, cleaning particulate pollution from the air. There's another good thing there for you, Glenn. Good things going on in the world somehow. In 1998, China accounted for 1.4% of the global car market production. In 2023, it was 38.4% of global car production.
So about 25 years to go from 1.4% to 38.4%. That's something that's moving quickly.
Yeah. China targets 15.5 million new energy vehicle sales in 2025 with a 20% growth year on year. New energy vehicles means it could be hydrogen, but there's not too many of those, or a plug-in hybrid, or a full electric vehicle. So 15.5 million. I mean, when we started this show, there wasn't that many in the world, I don't think. It's just crazy. China has realized an automotive industry growth stabilization plan aimed at achieving key economic development goals for the sector, which is good. Another one for you, Glenn. Global EV market has surged with 1.7 million sales in August, which is up 25% year on year. That's good. I'm sorry, but it's displacing fossil fuels, and I'm happy about that. And finally this week, I thought I'd share a wonderful short video for the BBC, perhaps you've heard of it, about corn or maize. We call it corn. The rest of the world calls it maize.
Yeah.
Farming in Malawi in Africa, the communities heavily rely on corn crops, but due to climate change and erosion, the ground is very hard there, and it's very difficult and laborious to cultivate before they plant the corn or maize. An NGO got many communities planting their crops deeper in the ground. I think it's more than 30 centimeters, with places for water to pool alongside the planting. And when they did this, the crops produced 40% larger yields. The video shows just how much bigger, and it's really significant, this technique is using. But, Brian, the digging was backbreaking, so solar of all things, came to the rescue.
So that's where this device could come in handy. It's a solar-powered tractor that uses a chain to dig into the earth. The AFTRAC tractor was designed by engineers at Loughborough University in the UK.
I've designed this to be the least electric vehicle in existence. It's very old school. It's like a 1950s tractor, but with modern day batteries. So what that enables you to do is that if an electrical component like a motor goes wrong, you can fix that component with a little bit of know-how in the field.
The tractor is charged by a microgrid that's been set up in the village. This also provides electricity to nearby homes to run things like lights and televisions.
It's the IKEA furniture of microgrids. So everything goes together without any tools. You can follow the YouTube video with the instruction manual. You can arrive in a box to where you want to put it up. And within half an hour to an hour, you can have a structure built with the array and the electronics all inside it and powering your home or powering the tractor.
So a crate of stuff shows up. In an hour, it's working.
Yeah.
And you don't need expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's giving you what diesel would have to do, which was costly and hard to transport to these communities. And voila. And the tractor itself, if you watch the video, has a little solar panel, a big solar panel on it.
Yeah.
So it's charging as it sits in the field as well. It's got batteries in it. This microgrid has given the community TVs. They have TVs in their homes now, and they have more crops to pay for the TVs, all because of cheap solar. And that is another wonderful thing.
Well, maybe they could make a fusion reactor that comes in a kit like that you can build yourself at home. Maybe that. Yeah, I think that would work. All right. That is our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. There's, of course, our Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod in the merch store. And remember to hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app, and you will get new episodes every week.
Thank you to all our Patreon members for supporting the show. And every week we get a shout out to our executive members, Green Bastard and Brent Routley. Thanks to everyone for supporting our climate positive content. And we'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.